Good evening, this is News.PH, but it's not politics as usual. I'm Pior Tiveros. They're getting stronger every year, and we bear the brunt of them, from Haiyan to Hagupit, Yolanda to Ruby. Lessons learned, but still so much more to do. Our guests in this first half of the show, Terrence Jones, the resident humanitarian coordinator in the Philippines for the United Nations, and joining us in a bit, James Reynolds, a storm chaser who was here for Haiyan and for Hagupit, joining us live from Hong Kong via Skype, and Pag-asa weather forecaster Fernando Cada. But we'll begin with Mr. Jones. Good evening, sir. Thank you very much for joining us.
Good evening, Pierre. Very pleased to be with you.
Well, you were once assigned to the Philippines back in 1999.
That's correct. For 4 years, I was here as resident coordinator, but at that time, not as humanitarian coordinator. So I think it's the perspective that the issue of climate change appears to be having an impact on the Philippines. And that's why we very much support the government's position in the negotiations in Lima this week, to really bring that issue to the forefront, because it has very big significance for the people of the Philippines, how we address those long-term issues to try to mitigate and reduce the impact of these disasters.
They took you out of retirement, and then because you retired in 2008, and I understand they brought you back just this November 21st.
Correct. I was thrown in at the deep end and have had to learn to swim very quickly. But of course, my previous experience here has helped a lot. And I'm very, very happy that many of the people I've been working with in addressing the issues with Typhoon Ruby, I knew in 2003. So that's made my introduction and hopefully my effectiveness, despite the recent arrival.
Well, what do you think of government response and preparation? Government response to and preparation for Ruby?
I was struck by three things. The first is a level of uncertainty about exactly how this typhoon would behave, because the strength, the intensity, the speed, the track, all these features, were changing hour by hour, day by day. And I think the government, I noticed, was calibrating its response. So many LGUs were activated to be prepared as these parameters change. So whereas originally we hoped it would not, but it would follow the Yolanda track. In fact, of course, it followed a different track. And in that context, I think the government was very, very responsive in activating LGUs to be prepared and pre-positioning stocks, organizing evacuation centers. So in that sense, I think we've seen a very, very well-managed, intensely managed mobilization of the whole of government at every level. And I think the international community has recognized that even if this Typhoon Ruby was not as dramatic and as strong as Yolanda, that the government have shown that they've learned lessons. They've certainly emphasized that to me, that those lessons have been learned, they've been applied, and from the president down, you've had this very intensive management, hands-on management of how to cope with and prepare for.
Yeah. So that's one thing. You said there were three things that you noticed.
Well, the second one is, in fact, given the uncertainty around the typhoon, the fact that the government has also been very responsive and calibrating how to prepare for and adjust to the typhoon. And I think the third aspect, which I'm more closely involved with, is how the international partners have responded. And I think, of course, there was a great deal of nervousness about what this typhoon might do compared to last year's experience. And therefore, we were, I think, as nervous as the government, and whether we would be prepared to provide the support to the government that might be needed if it were to have such a large impact as last year. Fortunately, the impact has been more limited, and I think we have been able to support the government on the ground, because we've had teams in the impacted areas on the recovery mode from Yolanda who have been switched to support the government in the main areas that were affected. And this, I think, has meant that our response has also been calibrated to follow the government's lead. And we've been able so far to mobilize in-country stocks of food, satellite phones, tarpaulin sheets to meet the immediate needs. And at this point, we are prepared to continue the dialogue with government as the assessments undertaken, particularly in Summer Island, become clearer. And we've undertaken those under government leadership jointly. So once we have those, we will be able to respond so I think it's been a very collaborative process. It's been one where we've shared information, worked together. And so far, fortunately, the impact in terms of immediate response has been met mostly by the government. And very quickly, I think we will be looking at early recovery. How can we help communities improve their shelter, go back to their livelihoods, start generating income? So the transition, we feel in most communities will be quite rapid.
Really? It's going to be much faster, quite rapid, as you said, compared to Yolanda, given that
of course,
the damages
the assessments are not all in yet.
Yes.
But I think in general, the impression is that in most areas, except maybe Eastern Samar and some parts of Western Samar, that we can see a rapid transition to early recovery. I think the government expects for the month of December to continue with its support. And then I think, we're already thinking, how do we support the transition to early recovery? So I think of course, there will be some communities which have been dramatically affected, and that is still being assessed, where continuing support for temporary shelter, for example, may be necessary. But I think, we certainly want to support the government to build back better and support the resilience of the people who in fact are now, we must confess that in these areas, the typhoons come several times a year, and they have very strong resilience in wanting to go back, plant your rice fields, restart your fishing, and so on. So I think we're very much in the mode of trying to realize that.
So you're generally happy with the way the government responded, the preparation, the forced evacuation even. But what about government and people hand in hand ensuring that our infrastructure is disaster resilient in terms of zoning, drainage, etc.? In other words, we can respond. We can evacuate people. We can bring in relief supplies for them. But what about, okay, then we build back better. We bring them back to the communities. But it's the same community, or,
Yes, it's a dilemma. Let me say, I've been very impressed with the level of engagement and cooperation between the government, volunteer groups, and the private sector. I think the private sector has been organized to make an effective contribution to this process. In terms of the longer term issue of how to mitigate and reduce the risks that people confront, we have been supporting the government, I think, especially since 2010 with the President's first declaration or decree on having LGUs focus on this issue of reducing risk and mitigating the impacts. We've been supporting the government, and so far I think we've mapped hazards, multiple hazards, in about 70 of the 81 provinces. And we started with the 27 who are most vulnerable, and that process of scientifically judging the likely impact of weather on the communities has enabled local governments to be able to begin to adjust their plans, physical, economic, and settlement plans. But the science is sounder. It's based on long-term projections of the impact of climate change. But the social side is always more difficult to handle, and in that context,
meaning convincing people not to build there.
And I think it's important to continue to work with communities. They have generations of attachment to to the land and to the. So it's not an easy issue. I think that has to be handled very carefully, and in that sense, the building back better maybe enabled them to stay in their ancestral areas, because in fact the housing or the infrastructure is able to withstand the impact of these powerful storms compared to their traditional housing, for example. And we've already seen in the Yolanda areas that some of the housing that has been built with our support has withstood this particular typhoon, and we're looking at how, for example, to maximize the use of cocoa lumber, of which there were huge volumes from Yolanda, to in fact support the building industry to provide cost-effective housing to some of these communities.
I know it's a little bit early, but just preliminarily, what are the points for improvement?
I would say that the government is very much in a learning mode, and they've just issued a new disaster response plan, and we are engaged with them to learn lessons as they implement it, and therefore from that process we'll be able to identify how to refine and adjust the protocols which have been put in place. I think we very much see the importance of capacitating local governments. They're on the spot, they know their people, they know their geography, and that, at that level I think we can continue to do more so that the resilience and the capacity to deal with these weather events will become stronger and stronger.
When you say capacitating, can you be more specific? Exactly.
I think
what do you mean by that?
there are several. I think it certainly has to do with the quality of infrastructure and its capacity to withstand the weather events, the issue of being able to multi-use buildings for evacuation and so on. It has to do with their planning capacity and using the scientific knowledge we have on the likely impact of multiple hazards, and how they can invest resources more effectively to address these concerns. And already I think we're seeing the results of the work we've done so far, that in fact that is what is happening. So certainly we'd like to see that applied nationwide, because so it's not something that can happen overnight, and we must continually retrain people because local governments change. So it's not something that you can relax with. You have to continuously reinforce the capacities at every level.
Well, there might be another one coming. There was a low pressure area hovering to the east of the country.
It's somewhat remarkable how resilient the nation is, in the fact, and confronted by the issue of having dealt with one typhoon, that the next one is a few days away. Hopefully, I've not looked at the weather forecast, but I hope this one passes the Philippines by, or is weak, that we can relax, and obviously people are looking forward to a happy Christmas. So
that's right, there is Christmas.
The timing is important. Yes.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Terence Jones. Thank you very much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you very much, Pia. Look forward to another time.
We'll take a short break. Please stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back. This is News.PH. I'm Pia Ontiveros. Joining us now is James Reynolds, a storm chaser, live from Hong Kong via Skype, and here in the studio, Pag-asa weather forecaster Fernando or Doy Cada. Good evening. James, good evening, and Doy, thank you very much for being here. James, let's begin with you. How long have you been chasing storms?
Well, I've been doing what I do for around 10 years now, and it's been keeping me very busy, I can say, with plenty of trips to the Philippines to document and film typhoons.
Just I'm sorry, not just the Philippines, all over Asia, right?
Absolutely. When I'm going after these strong typhoons, it's really anywhere between Japan and the Philippines. So that includes Taiwan, China, Guam, Vietnam, and even Palau I've been to before as well.
I wonder if this is a fair question, James. Where is it worse? here in the Philippines or elsewhere?
Well, unfortunately for the Philippines, the country really has the honor of being hit by the strongest storms more frequently than anywhere else on the planet. It's really just, unfortunately, lies in an area where these storms form and reach the greatest strengths that we see anywhere on the planet and hit more frequently than anywhere else as well.
All right, you were here. We were speaking Monday evening, and you were saying that we were saying you were here for Haiyan, and you came back for Hagupit. Were you here also for Ondoy? Were you here at that time, September 2009?
For Ondoy, that's a very good question, and actually, no, I wasn't, but I was watching it very closely. Normally, I travel to film the strong typhoons, which have the strong winds. But Ondoy was really very unfortunate that it didn't have the winds, but it packed the rain. And I remember just watching it blow up over Manila and realizing there's going to be serious trouble. And unfortunately, as we all know, the events were just terrible.
Can you describe to us, I know I asked you this question Monday evening, midnight, but can you describe for us what it was like to cover Haiyan or Yolanda and then Hagupit or Ruby?
Well, Yolanda was really, I don't anticipate ever filming a storm like that again in my lifetime. It was so exceptionally severe and unprecedented. Many meteorologists are saying it's one of the strongest cyclones to ever hit land, in recorded history, which just goes to show how rare an event like that is and how unprecedented it is. But nonetheless, typhoons are still strong. Just because typhoons aren't going forward as strong as Yolanda, the weaker ones can still be exceptionally dangerous. And, it's not all about the wind, as we've seen with other typhoons in the past, like, Typhoon or Tropical Storm Sendong and Typhoon Pepang. Those ones, they killed a lot of people, and it was solely because of the rain. So, all the typhoons are difficult.
You've captured the images very well, James, and you've described them so well over the last few days, what was going on in Ruby. What I want to ask you now is tell me what it felt like before Ruby hit where you were, Calbayog, right, in Samar. What it felt like when Ruby was coming, when Ruby was there, and after it had passed.
Well, to be honest, before the storm hit, I had a very, very sickening feeling, especially 1 or 2 days before when, Ruby was at peak strength. A lot of people were thinking, could this be another Yolanda? And thankfully it wasn't. But there was a lot of tension and apprehension and anxiety, and especially filming in Samar, especially on the East Coast where we were at first. There aren't very many safe places to ride out a strong typhoon. So we decided to play it safe and head to the West Coast to Calbayog and ride out the storm there. And we weren't taking any chances. It was really safety first. We felt we'd be safest in Calbayog.
And then when the weather, well, in a sense, when the weather cleared, when the storm had passed, in a sense also, what was your feeling when you went out and then you saw what had happened? What were you thinking?
Well, it was an exhausting storm. I can't imagine what it must have been like for, obviously, all the local residents with their own properties being buffeted by these strong winds and heavy rains for such a long time. It was well over 12 to 15 hours of these conditions. So it was a real relief once the storm had left and really the sun came out the next day. But thankfully in Calbayog, the damage, it appeared, wasn't so bad. We did see some flooding which had taken place south of the city. But I think it was a big sense of relief that another Yolanda had not happened. And really, it looked like things were a lot better than many people had anticipated before the storm hit.
Let's talk about what you thought of government preparation, all the forced evacuation that was going on, the response even. Compare what happened this time around for Ruby or for Hagupit and what happened for Yolanda.
Oh well, the contrast. This time it was fantastic to see how well prepared people were, how seriously they were taking the storm. I tried to get to Leyte from Cebu, and the ferries were cancelled well in advance. People were taking it very, very seriously. And that's a fantastic thing because, even if there is disruption to people's lives and businesses, if it means everyone gets through the storm safely and in one piece, I think that's the most important thing.
Do you think we did things better this time around?
Absolutely, undoubtedly. And now that there's a better understanding in those local communities of the risk of storm surge, we're talking about risks and dangers which really take no prisoners. If you are in a dangerous spot and exposed to the potential storm surge, you need to evacuate. And I think this was a great example to see people learning the lessons from Yolanda and heeding the advice of the officials.
Are there points for improvement? Are there things that we can improve on?
It's a good question. I think hopefully people don't get complacent. People need to understand that forecasts can be uncertain, and if you are in an area and you evacuate but your town doesn't get hit so bad, there's always a danger of people thinking that the authorities are crying wolf, and I really hope that does not happen, because these storms can be unpredictable, and the effects can be wide-ranging, certainly a long way from the eye of the storm, so to speak. So I really think as long as people just keep taking these threats seriously, listening to Pagasa and local government organizations who are distributing these warnings, then hopefully all the lessons of Yolanda have been learned, and going forward the deaths can be avoided.
Yeah. Which weather agency, by the way, were you following in terms of forecasting? There was Pagasa, there was JTWC, there was GMA.
There's many, and I look at all of them, because I am not a forecaster myself, so I depend on the experts at Pagasa and at JMA and JTWC, and then I have to just go with a bit of my own gut feeling as to where I think I need to be able to do my job as best as possible.
Okay, my last question, gut feeling, and given your 10 years experience, it is going to get worse, right?
Well, what is undeniable is that there are more and more people in harm's way these days. The towns and cities, the population is increasing. People are moving to the coast, to the big cities, and these are the areas where the dangers exist. The most people are a threat. And I'm busy doing my job. I'm a regular visitor to the Philippines and other countries, and I think it's not going to get any better. That's for sure.
All right. Thank you very much for joining us, James Reynolds. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Let's speak to Pag-asa weather forecaster Doy Cada. Doy, you heard what he said, no?
Yes, yes.
He was following Pag-asa, JTW, GMA. Was it an issue really for Pag-asa that people were, and not just him, everybody, people were reading up on all the forecasts of all the different agencies?
Yes, what happened is during the track of this Ruby, most of the model output have different scenarios, of course, and Pag-asa have their own capabilities, and we know that based from our climatological data, this is one of our bases, because we have about 50 years of data regarding what will be the normal tropical cyclone track during this time of the year.
Okay.
And we stick from when it's still about December 2, it is still outside the Philippine area of responsibility. And the mandate of Pag-asa, we will issue our official track once it enters the PAR. And we stick from entering the PAR, going directly to hit the Eastern Visayas. And there are some confusion because, maybe because of colonial mentality, some of our
Colonial mentality ba yun?
Some of our followers, of course, they believe that. Of course, they believe to JTWC because JTWC,
Joint Typhoon Warning Center, GMA, Japan, Meteorological Agency.
US, they have more equipment, high tech.
Pero meron naman sa GMA din, di ba?
Yes, but of course, it's a challenge for us. But we stick to our position, beginning the first when it entered the PAR, in traversing the Pacific Ocean, we stick to our forecast that it will hit Eastern Visayas.
Sigurado kayo.
Yes.
You never wavered, not like Ruby that was going this way. Kayo, talagang, kung ano yung naging forecast nyo, yun na yun.
Yes, of course, there are also cone of uncertainty. So lahat po ng mga forecast, lahat ng mga Met Agency, of course, there's an uncertainty of errors. For example, about 100-kilometer error is acceptable in meteorology. For example, within the next 24 hours, 48 hours, and 72 hours, the uncertainty becomes bigger. But during our study, because we have climatological data, and most of the average during the month of bare months, particularly December, the possibility of entering and hitting Eastern Visayas is likely most 100%.
100%. Not even less than 100%. Talagang 100%.
Of course, if this kind of tropical cyclone develop over the southern part or the eastern section of Visayas and Mindanao, but if a tropical cyclone develop over the eastern of Luzon, probably be the possibility of recurving or going to the north.
Yeah. Does Pag-asa still need other equipment or other technology? Do you really still need that? Because, I mean, kayo yung tama. Hindi yung JTWC, hindi yung JMA, kayo.
Yes po, but
you still need that?
Yes, yes.
Still,
See, when I was in Korea, so there are many lot of Doppler radar. Say Korea, average number of tropical cyclone or typhoon in a year is 2 to 3. But when I visited all the radar stations, they are overlapping. So halos nasasakop niya ng lahat ng range dun sa Korea. Pero halos 2 to 3 lang yung average nila na bagyo sa isang taon. But here in the Philippines, we have 19 to 20.
19 to 20?
19 to 20 tropical cyclones.
Yeah. How many Doppler radars do we have?
Around 10, but we are planning to make some few Doppler radar.
How many more do we need?
Much more, much better.
Yeah, no, give me a number. How many more?
Maybe about 30.
30. How much does one Doppler radar cost?
I am not sure, but $1 million.
$1 million, so
Three,
it's like 30 million.
Yes.
30 million,
I don't
60
know.
million, 90 million.
But most of our Doppler radar was donated by the other, like JICA. Of course, there's the previous president of PGMA radar. And unfortunately, the Giwan radar, which was devastated by Yolanda, still, hindi pa po na-turn over yun sa atin ng JICA ng Japan. So, nasira na. But of course, we are lucky because of the Birak Doppler radar, which captured, Birak Doppler radar captured the eye approaching when the first landfall happened in the lower eastern Samar.
Okay. So how are we going to get those Doppler radars?
Maybe procure, of course. There
Procure.
are a lot of our government. Of course, there are some donations through projects, grant aids.
Yeah. Well, are there any coming in? We really need them, right?
Yes.
So, are you going to scramble around for
Based from my latest information, two Doppler radar. One is in Iloilo and one is in Quezon, Palawan. So now they are in Iloilo.
Okay, so 2.
Yes, 2.
So 28 more to go.
Yes, much more, much better.
30 minus 2 is 28. Okay. And anything else that we need?
Of course, we have lack of forecaster.
Forecasters, because they're all going abroad.
Yes.
How many have we lost in the last year, for example?
Maybe around 10.
10. How many are you right now in Pag-asa?
There are many meteorologists in Pag-asa, but we have different specialization.
Okay.
Of course, there are climatologists, which is also considered as meteorologists. But for the weather forecaster, around 16, and about 5 or 4 of them are only new.
Okay, so we have 16 weather forecasters. Like you said, 4 or 5 are new. How many more do we need?
Maybe around 10 more.
10 more. Where would we source them? Where would we get them?
So Pag-asa every year or every 2 years conducted a training course, and some of them study at the University of the Philippines, and they acquire, of course, training abroad. So
or they are pirated and leave for abroad, right?
Some of them.
What's to keep them from leaving? Go ahead, say it. Better pay.
Better pay.
Yeah.
And of course, me as a weather forecaster, dito po tayo, minsan, yung criticism ng ating mga kababayan, minsan, it's a downgrade for us. We work. Of course, it is a forecast, and there are errors. That's why we call it a forecast.
You said, yes.
And sometimes, if there's katulad po ngayon, since nakaka-knowledge ng Pag-asa, so mas masaya kami. So, minsan kasi...
It'll make up for the low pay.
Yes.
I hope you don't mind. How much do you earn?
For our ordinary weather forecaster, a junior or senior, it's ranged about only 25 to 30,000 pesos.
25 to 30,000 pesos. Is there a law in the works that's going to, try and get you better pay?
Yes, because we are now, at present, na-receive naman po namin yung may mga benefits like hazard pay, longevity pay, so, and other benefits.
Okay. My last question for you now, because we have to say goodbye to you. What are the points for improvement? I mean, we know you did well, no? Tama kayo, your forecast was correct. But what are the points for improvement?
Of course, there are many things, of course, analyzing the correct data. Some of the data, of course, if you have wrong data, analysis is wrong.
Okay.
Okay, and then, of
The
course,
wrong data came from, very briefly?
sometimes there are automatic weather stations, and of course the sustainability of those, the maintenance.
Okay.
Of course, there are some sensors na minsan talagang hindi na natin na maintain well. So, it give a wrong data. Then, wrong data, wrong analysis, wrong forecast. But now, we have many sources of data.
Okay.
There's the equipment. So, mas maganda po yung ating forecasting ngayon.
All right. Well, thank you very much for joining us, Pag-asa Weather Forecaster Doy Cada. We hope to see you again. Thank you. And thank you also to James Reynolds, Storm Chaser, who joined us a little while ago, and also to Mr. Terrence Jones of the United Nations. We're taking a short break. When we come back, we'll talk about preparations for Pope Francis's visit. Please stay with us. News.PH will be right back. Welcome back. This is News.PH. I'm Pia Ontiveros. As Pinoys prepare for Christmas, there is as much excitement in the air for the visit of Pope Francis in January. In a sense, as Cardinal Chito Tagle told me in an interview we aired on Monday, the season of Advent has many meanings that we must learn to wait and to prepare while we wait. So we talk about the preparations, the nitty-gritty, the details of the visit of Pope Francis in January. Our guests tonight, DOH Undersecretary Ted Herbosa, who is in charge of all things health, of course. What else? Father Greg Gaston, who is joining us via Skype from Rome in the Vatican, and Martin Aguda, a crowd management and events risk management consultant who is helping out in preparations for the visit. Martin will join us in the last segment of the show. Let's begin with Undersecretary Herbosa. Good evening.
Good evening, Pia.
Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you too for inviting me.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure people are expecting me to ask you about the latest controversies in the health department, but we're going to steer clear of that for tonight.
There's no controversy.
There's no
The department
controversy.
is doing very well.
Yeah.
We did very well during the Typhoon Ruby, and we're also on track on our preparations for the papal visit.
Talagang umiwas talaga kayo sa sa mga problema ng health department. But well, after all, in the season of Advent, there is forgiveness.
Mercy and compassion.
Mercy and compassion.
Yes,
so
we
you
were
feel
together.
merciful and compassionate
Yes.
for people in the health department. Anyway, okay. Yusek Herbosa, let's talk first about the individual first. What kind of preparations should, we will call them, you call them pilgrims. Now, these people who will be going to Luneta to join the Mass of the Pope, or going to the Mall of Asia for the meeting with the families,
or
UST, or even Tacloban. What kind of preparations should we be making?
Well, number one, we heard in the recollection that we should also prepare ourselves spiritually. But of course, there are what we call the health risks.
Yes.
When we have pilgrimages, there are health risks, especially for people who have associated illnesses, elderly, people with asthma, people with hypertension, diabetes. A lot of them should assess what risks they will have for walking long periods, maybe waiting in the crowds for long periods of time. Do they have their medicines and all that stuff? So they have to assess whether they're healthy enough to join in these festivities, or actually just stay at home and do the low risk type and be safe.
Watch it on TV.
And watch it on TV on the
On 9
station.
TV.
On 9 TV.
Okay.
And that's very important. And people have to prepare. I think even people that are elderly will have to walk long periods of long kilometers to be able to cover to see the Pope.
Would you discourage those who have health problems or disease or anything? Would you discourage them from going?
The assessment for that is their own doctors. Their own doctors who will clear whether they are fit enough to do this pilgrimage, whether if they're from Visayas, I heard of Visayans will all go to Tacloban. If they're from Metro Manila, whether they can take the trip to Luneta with all the 5 million other pilgrims that will welcome the Pope.
What do you also suggest now for the elderly, well, actually for anyone, no, if they have a health condition, in a big crowd, for example, in Luneta, when you get there, of course, you want to go as close as possible to the stage. No? Sometimes people will get stuck in the middle of this big
Correct.
crowd.
Correct.
What do they do if there is an emergency?
The key here is being able to know exactly where they can get help, who they're with, for example. And of course, first aid, very important. So we're coordinating that. That's exactly what we prepare. Alam mo, Pia, preparing for this big crowd, big religious event, is the same as preparing for a coming typhoon, like Typhoon Ruby. Because you look at the hazards, you look at the health hazards that people will face, and then you try to prepare for that. So
And you anticipate, no?
correct. And you said
Anticipate what
there'll
could
be crowds.
Yes.
So it's not going to be easy to bring someone who collapses to the hospital because
Right,
the
you won't be
traffic.
able to get through.
So you need to put the field hospital there. So you need to put first aiders near people who are walking
Yeah.
because no ambulances
So there
can
will
enter.
be 2 field hospitals in the middle
Correct.
of that big crowd in Luneta.
Correct. The plan is to set up 2 field hospitals similar to what we set up during the typhoons.
Yeah.
But man it already with the people. And actually there will be other first aid stations or medical stations because you want it to be accessible. You want all of these first aid stations to be accessible to the big crowd.
Yeah.
There is a very big crowd that will actually need assistance.
Yeah.
And a lot of them want help, and sometimes it's very simple help. So you will have everybody from very simple first aider to a specialist in heart or diabetes or something.
When you
that
say
will provide
field
care.
hospital, you mean, of course,
Emergency services and
Okay.
outpatient services that can be given by doctors and nurses. So we plan to staff 2 of those and about 22 other stations around Luneta. But we're covering everything. We're covering the ones in Tacloban as well with our Visayas colleagues. Most of our
there will be
regional-
field hospitals also in the Visayas?
No, we're not
No.
fielding field
Okay.
hospitals there.
Yeah.
Because the crowd there is something like only 2 million, the estimate. In Luneta, the
Luneta.
estimate is 5 to 6 million.
Isn't that a conservative estimate?
That's a conservative estimate because during the time of the previous papal visit, of which I was involved as well, we had about 5 million. And we found that our medical stations were actually not that what you described. They were too far in terms
Yeah.
of being able to access for the crowd.
Okay, it's interesting that we use the term field hospital, and this is a good segue because we're going to talk to Father Greg Gaston, who's joining us from the Vatican, because Pope Francis himself uses that term to describe how he envisions the church. He wants it to be a hospital in the middle of the battlefield, in the middle of a big crowd of people. And we wanted to bring in Father Greg Gaston, who's joining us, like I said, from the Vatican. Good evening from Manila, Father Greg. Thank you for joining us. Father Greg, good evening. Can you hear me?
Hello, yes. Good evening to all our viewers.
Yes, Father Greg, you are the rector of the Pontificio Collegio Filipino. Can you tell us first what that is?
Yes, this is Pontificio Collegio Filipino. This is the residence of our Filipino priests doing further studies here in Rome. So the priests come from the different dioceses in the Philippines, and we also accept non-Filipinos space permitting. So we are located in Rome, close to the Vatican. Actually, we could see the Vatican from the top of our building.
And I understand Cardinal Chito was telling us that you are raising funds to repair the collegio.
Actually, the building is already 53 years old, so it's suffering from all sorts of illness, we could say, not just like the body. If you reach 50, a little more than 50, then you start with some complaints. So the building is also undergoing renovations. We finished the first and second floors, as well as the heating system. So we're now going into the third floor.
Okay, so it's in ICU right now. Radyo, you are the Vatican correspondent for Radio Veritas, is that correct?
Yes, actually, whenever there's an activity here with the Holy Father, canonization of Pedro Calungsod or of Pope John Paul II, uh, uh, the election of the new Pope, so Radio Veritas always calls me up and I do a little commentary for them.
And will you be coming here to Manila for the visit of the Pope?
Yeah, well, we pray that I could make it to Manila, also to cover for Radio Veritas.
Okay. Can you tell us, Father, what is the atmosphere in the Vatican like as people there are preparing for the Pope's visit, for his trip here to the Philippines? What are people saying about what the Pope will find in the Philippines?
Well, first of all, people, non-Filipinos, are congratulating us because they're also happy that the Pope will be coming to our place, especially because the Pope, following the theme of mercy and compassion, the Pope would like to visit, especially all the victims, not only of Yolanda, but all the other victims, different places, different typhoons, earthquakes, victims also of violence. And well, symbolically, he would be going to Tacloban, to the Archdiocese of Palo, but that doesn't mean that he will be visiting only Palo, but he'll be also inviting people from other places. And I think even in Manila, there will be a lot of meetings, and that those meetings would include also some victims of suffering, well, to show this concept of mercy and compassion, to, in one way or another, to extend to us, to the Filipinos especially, the mercy and compassion which actually come from God Himself.
What are the officials of the Vatican, the cardinals there, the bishops, the archbishops, priests there in the Vatican? What are they saying about this coming visit? Have you spoken to anyone there who was also here during the 1995 visit of John Paul II? And are they making comparisons? Are they, are they also excited about this?
Yes, of course. They all remember the visit of Pope John Paul II, which was the last papal visit. That was in 1995. So at the time, people were really impressed with the multitude, not only in terms of the number of people who attended the mass, the world's largest mass so far, and they're all saying that with Pope Francis, most probably the mass will be even bigger than in 1995 during the World Day. And I'm sure, of course, with the collaboration of everyone, this big mass in Luneta will be a great success, not only in terms of number, but in terms of personal conversion, asking for mercy, compassion from the Lord, and also for us to be more merciful and compassionate towards others. And so the officials here, the priests, the bishops, also the lay people, the non-Filipinos, they're all excited. And how much more the Filipinos? They're also all excited, even though we're here. Here in Rome, we can see the Pope relatively easily. We can attend these audiences. We can go to the Angelus. So every Sunday, every Wednesday, we can see the Pope. But it's a completely different story for the Pope to come to our place in the Philippines. So we're all really excited for this coming.
Is there any chance, Father Greg, that there could be a tweak in the schedule or the activities? Because with Ruby, with what happened in Ruby, you have Eastern Samar province being quite badly hit by Ruby. Is the Pope the kind who'll say, I want to go to Eastern Samar? Meron ba siyang ganon? Is that possible?
Logistics would be a little limited, no? And of course, the Pope is always updated. He knows about this new recent typhoon, Ruby, and surely is also praying for all the victims, all those who have suffered, all these calamities, not only the typhoons, but the other calamities as well. Much as he would like, I'm sure he would like to visit even all the islands. You can say all the 7,000 islands of the Philippines. Yes, it would not be that easy. So what he'll do is he'll be inviting people from other places to meet him. No? But well, knowing Pope Francis, anything could happen. No? There could be surprises. Although maybe it would be a little difficult, logistics wise, but we'll never know. We'll never know.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Father Greg Gaston. Thank you so much for talking to us tonight.
Thank you, Pia. and thank you to all our viewers.
We'll have to take a short break. Please stay with us. News.PH will be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back. You're watching News.PH. We're talking about preparations for the visit of Pope Francis in January. Joining us here in the studio, of course, Dr. Ted Herbosa, the Health Department, and Martin Aguda, Crowd Management and Events Risk Management Consultant, a volunteer also in preparations for Pope Francis's visit. Martin, your expertise is crowd management, crowd control, crowd science, and dami na, all crowd. So we're looking at very big crowds in January. What should we remember?
Well, when talk of crowd management, that's different from security. Actually, that's a gray area between security and safety. So crowd management is planning for a mammoth crowd. That's a proactive approach compared to crowd control, which is reinstating order in case something happens. So that includes analyzing the venue, then checking the crowd behavior. There's such thing as crowd behavior, crowd psychology. We must remember that everybody wants to get near the Pope.
Right.
And analyzing the crowd, nowadays people have their own cell phones and they want to have a selfie shot with the Pope. So instead of just looking at the Pope from afar, they would tend to go near, and there will you have possible crowd problems. No? They should be considered. And talking about millions of people, again, there's this called critical crowd density, which is 7 persons per square meter.
Wow, that's really dense.
That is the formula actually for a crowd disaster.
Correct.
So the organizer should more or less make sure that the crowd per area should not exceed this number. So,
but will there be like barriers now at a certain point they will stop people from coming in, or it's going to be just a free-flowing thing?
yeah,
People can
I'm not
just-
particular with the exact layout, but as we can see in big events, they put barriers, and that barrier should be again sturdy enough. Human barricade is not enough because the crowd surge might overpower them. No?
Yeah.
So all of these things in terms of preparation for a crowd surge should be taken into consideration.
What kind of advice can you give people? I'm sure that people are listening to you right now, no? And syempre, when you say, ang dami gusto magpa-selfie, no? What advice would you give people who want to have a selfie with the Pope?
Well, kung medyo malayo sila, wag na lang sila mag-push forward because it will cause injuries and
Selfie
inconvenience.
stick na lang.
Oh,
Selfie stick, like a 1 kilometer selfie stick.
Siguro, because sometimes people don't realize, the problem with large crowds is that people at the back don't realize what's happening in front, no? When they push. There's a front and back miscommunication, as we call in crowd management. No? It's very important that you have marshals telling you that don't push forward. Those are critical preparations, and it should be in place as part of the overall crowd
I have
management
a very
plan.
good
Yes,
suggestion
yeah.
to them. You go to the malls, there's a live image of Pope, and they take a selfie
Have
now.
a selfie.
And I have a selfie now, and then I'm done. I've taken a picture of my wife with that and posted it. And everybody was saying, "So you're so lucky."
Yeah,
because it looks like a real selfie with the Pope. So
okay.
maybe that's a solution. And then you just go there and pray.
Right. Okay. So and for people at the back of the crowds not to push forward, what else?
But it's easier said than done, of course. But the people would
No,
really
but you can
want
make
to.
that appeal now because I'm sure there are people who are
Maybe
watching.
I'll add what Martin
Yeah.
is describing. A week before the Pope visits is the Black Nazarene. Black Nazarene is a study. It's a study in crowd management.
Yep.
And it's a different culture. And I've shown this in an international conference for mass gathering events. And they were amazed. The other people and experts in crowd management were amazed at the culture of the people who are Black Nazarene pilgrims. Because they climb on top of each other, and it's so different. And you'll see a video of, let's say, the Muslims in, let's say, when they do the Hajj, which is very tame, very different. And then our last papal visit with the World Youth Day in '95, again, different cultures. Then you look at a rock concert that has, with alcohol and probably drugs, and then a different type of behavior. So that's the type of thing we wanted to control. There were actually big name stars that wanted to perform in Tacloban. We said, no, do not change the
Big
crowd
name
culture.
stars wanted to perform in
volunteer after the Pope said,
leaves.
Yep.
I think we continue the praying and then the spirituality, because
Yeah.
this is a spiritual event.
Yeah.
And for mass gathering, right?
Yep.
We keep the spirituality. Everybody is helpful. Everybody is merciful. Everybody is compassionate.
Compassionate. Let's be compassionate towards
To-
each
to-
other.
to-
Let's not insist on the selfie. Let's not push forward.
In the last papal visit, the crowd estimates were 5 per
Meter.
per square meter.
It
So that
was-
was reaching actually proportions.
Yep.
Yet we did not have any disaster at that time. That was the
Yeah.
nice thing, because
Oo.
everybody was very cool, calm. You know, people were helping each other. There was charity. What was the theme then? Was charity, I think. Charity or helping others. So
Well, okay, can you make that appeal now from both your standpoints as a medical professional and Martin as a crowd management expert?
Well,
for people to
if Martin's ideas do not come to fruition, I get into trouble. Because I'm the
Yan.
recipient of man's bad behavior.
Right,
The emergency
right.
people are the recipients of man's bad behavior. If they become rowdy, they push each other, they go there without their medicines, I have to be prepared and take care of them. But if they listen to a guy like Martin, then they'll be able
Then
to
there'll be no
prepare.
trouble.
There'll be no trouble.
Everybody
I will
will be
of no
okay.
use, which is what I
that's
like.
what we want.
That's
That's
what
what
I
we
want.
want.
There's a crowd phenomenon called the individualization. Your individual behavior can be changed into something else, undesirable behavior, and it will adapt to the behavior of the crowd. Marshalling is very important. So if somebody starts to climb up a fence, somebody should
Stop.
tell stop. Little things should be controlled at the very start of a possible trouble. So I think the marshals and the volunteers should be aware of all of this
Okay.
crowd management phenomenon that could happen.
Oo. But if somebody sees something like that, somebody trying to climb a fence, kung walang marshal, it can be anyone, no?
Yep.
Not try to stop the person.
In
I
the
mean,
planning,
you
we
know.
said or if they come from parishes or groups like couples,
They should police themselves.
they police
Yep.
themselves. The idea was they also have their own marshals
Yep.
that will
That's right.
contain their crowd and make sure they are not infiltrated by other
That's
people
right.
who have different ideas of what to do. So
Okay.
the behavior is well planned and prepared.
Okay, well, I wish we had more time, but we can always have part 2 because there's so much to talk about.
Yes.
So thank you very much to our guests in this second half of the show, Dr. Ted Herbosa, Martin Aguda, and Father Greg Gaston from the Vatican. Thank you for watching. See you again next Wednesday. Good night.